Every abandoned object or place on this planet tells a story. They might be forsaken now, but once they served a purpose. Just because they've been left behind doesn't mean they deserve to be erased. Some of the most fascinating sights on Earth are these forgotten places, and if they could speak, they'd have some wild stories to tell. So let's bring those stories to life in this video. These are the 15 most incredible abandoned objects that really exist in the world. Number 15. Kennott. Kennott was never meant to last, but for a few decades in the early 1900s, it buzzed with life. After a massive copper deposit was found in Alaska's Chitina region, mining companies flooded in like Kentucky meat shower. They needed workers, and those workers needed homes, so Kennott was born. By the 1930s, this place had everything: a hospital, a school, a church, saloons, and even its own railway. But like most mining towns on this planet, its fate was tied to what lay underground. And by 1938, the copper ran dry. The mines shut down, the trains stopped coming, and the entire population vanished almost overnight. Today, its wooden buildings still stand, frozen in time, worn but resilient. Some structures now sit on the National Register of Historic Places, drawing curious visitors every year. If you're walking through the town, you'll feel like stepping into a sepia-toned snapshot of America's industrial past. Kennott didn't fade slowly. It dropped off a cliff, and what remains is both super beautiful and haunting. Number 14. President's Park. Mount Rushmore isn't the only place where giant presidential heads exist. There is also another one. Tucked away in Williamsburg, Virginia, a strange graveyard of history. 43 massive busts of U.S. presidents from the now-defunct President's Park. Back when the park operated, it was arguably more surreal and visually overwhelming than Rushmore. But in 2010, the attraction folded, leaving the towering 20-foot statues without a home. The park's founder, Howard Hankins, couldn't bring himself to destroy them, so he hauled them to his family's private farm. That's where they've stood ever since, weather-beaten, cracked, and crumbling, but still towering with eerie dignity. Their necks are broken, their faces stained by years of storms, but they're still very much there. Hankins still hopes they'll be restored and put back on display someday. But realistically, they'd need serious repair before that could happen. Until then, they sit in the middle of nowhere, massive, forgotten, and weirdly mesmerizingly super creepy. Number 13. Bennett College. This mansion-like structure in New York's Hudson Valley looks like something straight out of a ghost story, but it once symbolized academic prestige. Known as Bennett College for Women, it opened its doors in 1890 and ran for nearly a century. It was exclusive, and parents would go to ridiculous lengths to get their daughters admitted, but by the time it shut down in 1978, its reputation leaned more toward elitism than excellence. Over the years, its popularity tanked. Left untouched for over 40 years, the building is in serious decay. Oddly enough, the inside is in better shape than the outside. You'll still find old-school books and desks lying around. The whole place has faced scheduled demolition more than once, yet somehow it keeps surviving. Now it's falling apart on its own, piece by piece. There's no horror movie crew behind it, just time doing its thing. What was once an elite institution is now just waiting for gravity to finish the job. Number 12. Hachiha Royal Hotel. Back when international travel wasn't an option for most Japanese citizens, domestic resorts flourished. One of the grandest was the Hachiha Royal Hotel on Japan's Gima Island, floating in the Philippine Sea. This place wasn't subtle. French Baroque design, plaster Greek statues, sprawling water fountains. It was a full-on spectacle. It catered to the middle class, offering a tropical fantasy just a ferry ride from Tokyo. Promoters even called it Japan's answer to Hawaii. But once international flights became affordable and accessible, travelers traded imitation for the real thing. Multiple rebrands failed to bring guests back, and the hotel went bankrupt in 2006. Since then, it's rotted in the salty coastal air. The ocean climate has wrecked the structure from the inside out. Vines grow through corridors, and old computers are now blanketed in moss. The building's bones are still there, but the life has long drained out. What was once a bustling, ambitious resort is now being swallowed by the island it once celebrated. Number 11. Hodawan Village. There's abandonment, and then there's total surrender. Hodawan, once a busy fishing village on Shengshan Island in China, is now almost entirely consumed by greenery. Well, that's Mama Nature. Ivy and moss blanket every home, stairway and rooftop like the plants are reclaiming their space. Fishing supported over 2,000 people here, but the ocean couldn't keep up with demand. When the catch dried up, so did the population. Most left gradually, leaving homes intact. Furniture, tools, and even photos still sit where they were. That lush overgrowth transformed Hodawan into a surreal tourist magnet. Visitors wander through corridors where nature and architecture are now tangled into one. Some of the tour guides are former residents who once lived here, now returning not to fish, but to tell stories. Despite being only 40 miles from downtown Shanghai, standing in Hodawan feels like you've stepped into another century. It's alive, just not in the way you'd expect. Not haunted, just overtaken by silence and leaves. Number 10. Grossingers Resort. Liberty, New York, hides the remains of what used to be the hottest Catskills getaway, Grossingers Resort. In its prime during the 1950s, this place attracted wealthy New Yorkers looking to escape the city. So much so that Commentary magazine once dubbed it the Waldorf of the Borscht Belt. Grossingers wasn't just a pretty hotel, it was the first U.S. resort to use artificial snow for year-round skiing. Even Rocky Marciano trained here. What started as a modest hotel in 1917 kept expanding until the early 70s. But when owner Jenny Grossinger passed in 1972, the charm faded fast. By 1986, the resort had shut its doors for good. Today, nature has taken over, creeping vines and shattered windows included. The place is barely standing, and what's left is set to be demolished to make way for new development. It's one of those once glorious landmarks that couldn't outlive the person who made it shine. Now it's just ruins and echoes of a golden era. Number 9. Six Flags New Orleans. What's left of Six Flags in New Orleans is barely recognizable. When it opened in 2000, it was packed with roller coasters, food stands, and families chasing thrill rides. But everything changed when Hurricane Katrina tore through the city in August 2005. The park never stood a chance, severely flooded, damaged beyond repair, and ultimately abandoned. Discussions about what to do with the land dragged on for years. Meanwhile, vines crept over rusting steel, and alligators moved into murky lagoons where children once played. In 2019, demolition was finally on the table, until officials learned it would cost over $1 million just to clear the site. That stalled the process again. Today, the park stands frozen in time, occasionally used as a filming location for movies or shows, but otherwise forgotten. Locals see it as both a safety hazard and a depressing reminder of what the city lost. It's not a theme park anymore. It's a shell. A place where laughter used to echo is now swallowed by silence. Mother Nature is really brutal, isn't it? Number 8. Gima. Well, the first is that Gima isn't your typical ghost town. Unlike most places that fell to time or Mother Nature, this one was drowned on purpose. In 1978, Romania's communist regime decided a copper mine mattered more than an entire village, so they flooded it. Gima's residents were pushed out, and toxic runoff from the mine was dumped straight into the valley. What's left today is disturbing. The church spire still juts out of a surreal, acidic lake, its colors hypnotic but deadly, thanks to heavy metals like copper, sulfur, and iron. A few determined locals refuse to leave, and still live along the edges, even as the contaminated water creeps closer year by year. The sludge isn't just dangerous, it's suffocating what little remains. Tombstones poke through the surface, and rooftops seem to float in a chemical soup. It's beautiful in a grotesque way, and also a reminder of what happens when industry wins over humanity. Gima wasn't just abandoned, it was sacrificed, and now it's slowly vanishing under poison. Number 7. Koloon Walled City. At its prime time, Koloon Walled City was chaos stacked vertically. Cramped into just 6.4 acres, more than 30,000 people lived inside a dense maze of concrete, wires, and stairwells with little sunlight and even less regulation. It began as a military outpost during the Song dynasty around 960 AD, later morphing into a fortified garrison town. But in the 20th century, it became something else entirely, a self-governed hive cut off from the rest of Hong Kong. The government avoided it. So did the police. Drug trades, illegal dentistry, and unlicensed factories operated unchecked. Despite its lawlessness, life thrived inside. Families lived above brothels. Kids played in alleys barely wider than hallways. By 1993, the final residents accepted government compensation to relocate. Koloon was demolished the same year. Today, only fragments of the southern wall remain, just enough to hint at the madness that once existed here. It wasn't built to be a city, but for decades, it became its own strange world. Number 6. Nikicoa Buffer Zone. In the heart of Nikicoa, Cyprus, lies a stretch of land frozen in conflict. Created in 1974 after a ceasefire agreement, the United Nations buffer zone cuts across the capital, separating the Greek Cypriot south from the Turkish Cypriot north. Though the entire island is divided, the section in Nikicoa is particularly haunting. Homes, shops, schools, even Nikicoa International Airport sit untouched and sealed behind barricades. Time has layered dust over personal belongings that were left behind in the rush of evacuation. The silence is absolute, interrupted only by the occasional patrol or wildlife creeping through empty buildings. Furniture remains arranged. Clothes hang in closets and calendars are still turned to 1974. This 112-mile line has turned part of Cyprus into a living time capsule, marking decades of stalled diplomacy. Despite numerous efforts, no resolution has been reached, and the buffer zone endures, quiet, tense, and slowly fading into memory while standing as a stark reminder of division that still lingers in Europe. Number 5. Beitz Hospital Military Hospital. This abandoned hospital complex in Beitz, Germany, doesn't just feel ominous. It is, known locally as Beitz Hospital. The facility dates back to 1898. Originally a sanatorium for lung disease, it transformed into a military hospital during both World Wars. Adolf Hitler himself was treated here after being injured in World War I. Post-war, the Soviets took over in 1945, using it as a military hospital for decades, long after the USSR technically ceased to exist. The Soviets finally left in 1995, and most of the hospital's 60 buildings have stood vacant ever since. Surgery wings, psychiatric units, even a shooting range, they're all crumbling and silent now. Nature has crept in, but not enough to soften the place's heavy past. It's been used in films like The Pianist, and a canopy walkway was added to let people safely look in without stepping through debris. It's eerie, intact, and deeply rooted in Europe's most volatile history. This isn't just abandoned architecture. It's a cold relic of war and survival. Alright guys, now let's talk about Number 4. Iroaki Jungle Park. This eerie overgrown landmark on Japan's Yu Peninsula was once a lively destination known as Iroaki Jungle Park. It opened in 1969 with a dual identity, part botanical garden and part theme park. But it didn't take long before the place started losing relevance. Compared to bigger, flashier parks popping up across Japan in the 80s and 90s, Iroaki couldn't keep up. The attractions felt outdated, and the crowds stopped coming. By 2003, it was done. Left alone, nature didn't waste time reclaiming the 40,000 square foot property. Cracked walkways are now blanketed in moss, and shattered windows frame jungle-like foliage that's crept inside the buildings. For urban explorers, the site's apocalyptic vibe is a draw, but it's not exactly safe. Thick swarms of insects and who knows what else lurk in the undergrowth. It's often compared to a movie set from Jurassic Park, but this isn't fiction. This is a real place, once built for wonder, now collapsing under its own forgotten dreams. And it's better than the Aokigahara. Number 3. Krocco. Perched on a hillside in Italy's Matera province, Krocco looks like the backdrop of a medieval epic, and for good reason. This town thrived for over 1,400 years, surviving invasions, pandemics, and wars. But it couldn't survive a landslide. In 1991, the ground beneath Krocco shifted violently, forcing the entire population to evacuate. Buildings remained almost untouched, but the people never came back. The town's medieval architecture, including a 14th century castle and a church housing a statue of the Virgin Mary, is still remarkably intact. That statue, said to have been pulled from a nearby lake under strange conditions, remains the focal point of an annual religious festival. Though no one lives here now, thousands return every year to honor the town's spirit. Staying overnight is no longer permitted, but walking through Krocco today feels like time paused mid-sentence. It's not ruined, it's resting, quietly watching the valley below. Krocco isn't lost, it's waiting, worn but still standing, like it always has. Number 2. Omatos Wine Press. On the edge of the Troodos Mountains in Cyprus, in a quiet corner of the village of Omatos, stands a structure that hasn't changed for centuries. The Omatos Wine Press, or Lanos Tuyuyu Sharilla, dates back to medieval times and still looks like it did 800 years ago. It's not much more than a single room, but every inch of it speaks to the island's deep winemaking history. Inside you'll find massive cauldrons, ancient vats, and the original wooden press. Dominating the space is a heavy double-beam rig used for crushing grapes. Workers once layered grapes onto wooden trays beneath one end of the beam, then rotated a huge screw that lifted a heavy stone and crushed everything under immense pressure. Though this traditional technique is no longer used in Cyprus, the room remains untouched, like a scene frozen in time. As long as this wine press stands, the legacy of Cypriot winemaking and the generations behind it won't be forgotten. Number 1. Switzerland sits nuclear shelters. Switzerland took Cold War anxiety to another level. The country built over 300,000 nuclear bomb shelters, enough to fit more than 9 million people, which is more than the entire population. That means every Swiss citizen could theoretically ride out a nuclear apocalypse underground with room to spare. These bunkers were mostly built during the 1950s and 1960s when Soviet bomb tests and global tensions had the Swiss government preparing for the worst. More popped up after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and even more after Japan's Fukushima disaster in 2011. Today, though, nearly all of them are sitting unused, sealed, dusty, and silent. Many are still structurally intact, hidden beneath neighborhoods, schools, and even apartment complexes. It's like a parallel underground world built entirely on fear. The Swiss didn't just prepare, they over-prepared. And now, all that concrete, steel, and panic sits buried, mostly forgotten. It's a national quirk, extreme readiness that's left behind a surreal legacy of empty shelters and sealed tunnels. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more awesome content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon in the next one.